Right now in the studio, I have with me the lovely Tahnee. Welcome, Tahnee.
Thank you for having me.
You're most welcome. The 10 Terrains of Consciousness, a groundbreaking new model that explains human nature and humanity's journey of spiritual evolution. So that's quite a profound sort of summary of the work that you do. Tell us a little bit about that.
The model itself, it does sound very grand when we say a groundbreaking new model, explaining human nature and human spiritual evolution, but that is actually what it is. Underneath all the different behaviours that we're seeing on this planet, all the different choices that are being made, the different worldviews, the different beliefs, the different ideologies, under it there are basically 10 fundamentally different, what we call terrains of consciousness, essentially paradigms, but it's kind of deeper than paradigms because they're 10 fundamentally different perceptions of the world.
So you mentioned before about the terrain of consciousness and how that relates to the ancient Celtic peoples. So what can you say about that?
Well, for me, I see them as a wonderful example of the terrain that we call the connection-based terrain, which we give the symbol of the circle. And a nice way to explain that is actually to compare it to the two terrains before it, because I think that will show you really what is the big shift that happens when someone moves into circle. So 2 terrains prior to that, we have the order-based terrain, in which we have the symbol of the square. And this is the terrain that mainstream Australia is at the moment. It's a terrain of people who, in order to feel safe, need to feel like they're part of a system and need to feel that they're playing a role in that system that is important, that is for the common good of the majority. So they tend to be quite conservative and want to fit in and conform to the system. They tend to have lifelong jobs and believe in institutions like banking and teaching and bureaucracy and universities and political structures, and it's order-based.
So would they do that to be accepted against their sort of their deeper desires, do you think?
Well, the order-based terrain is reacting to the previous one, which we call pyramid, which is the will-based terrain. That is a terrain of the kind of Wild West mentality. It's every man for himself. It's the rampant reign of the ego. I'll take what I want. I'll go for instant gratification. The survival strategy there is to accumulate as much power and wealth so that you can dominate, manipulate, and stand on the top of the pyramid.
I can think of somebody like that.
Yeah, there's a fair few people like that around running our planet. So those at Square are reacting to that. So their fear of the rampant reign of the ego and everything that brings about has caused them, in order to feel safe in the world, to cling to fitting into a system.
Yeah.
So if someone shifts from Square to Diamond, which we call the reflection-based terrain, suddenly they no longer define themselves by their role in the system. The big shift or the event horizon that they cross when they step into this terrain is that they feel that they now have a unique identity, that they can decide who they are, not the system. So now, this is when you find people leaving corporate structures and becoming entrepreneurs and becoming artists, and this is my brand, and this is my look, and this is my artistic point of view, and this is who I am, and I decide who I am, this is how I wear my hair, and today it's pink, and it's a terrain of identity.
Yeah.
And it's actually the terrain that is prevailing culturally at the moment in the Western world. You'll find it in places like Sydney, you'll find it in New York. It's the terrain that has created a consumerist, fast-paced, celebrity-oriented culture because it's about reflected identity. And it's a mind terrain. It's a terrain that it tries to manage its life through the mind. So it's goal setting and intentions and manifesting, and a lot of the spiritual stuff we're taught is coming from Diamond. So the shift that happens when someone moves from Diamond to Circle, which we call the connection-based terrain, a wonderful example of it is in the movie Avatar. The character, towards the end, the main character shifts from Diamond to Circle in that film. At that moment when someone shifts from Diamond to Circle, they can suddenly, deeply and truly feel their connection to the web of life. It's not just an idea. It's an embodied, felt experience. And at that point, they feel their connectedness to other people, to animals, to their ancestors, to future unborn generations, and to the earth. And it's a terrain that's guided by the heart, not the head. So it's a huge shift. When someone goes from Diamond to Circle, they're just blithering around going, where am I? Like, I don't want to do the work I was doing. I want to move where I'm living. I don't resonate with my friends anymore. Suddenly I'm not interested in intention and manifesting, and I just want to listen to my heart. What does my heart want to do? It can be very confusing, that jump.
So there's 10 of these different terrains, and I expect that you'll explore all of those when you're doing the presentation.
Yes.
Now, you've got that coming up for the community centre on Wednesday, I believe.
Yes, Wednesday at 6 o'clock.
So you'll bring people through those, identifying those different terrains so that they can recognise themselves and others.
What we're going to do is we're going to give sort of an overview of the whole model. What does all this mean? What actually is a terrain of consciousness? We'll explain how people move through the continuum in their evolution. We'll also explain how civilizations can move through it, because it's not just individuals. Countries are also going through this.
As groupthink.
As groups. The prevailing terrain in any civilization is evolving along this continuum, and as a planet we're evolving along this continuum. So that's also fascinating, so we'll explain that. We're going to devote quite a large chunk of the talk to going through the 10 terrains in some detail, as much detail as we can in a short talk, but enough that people will leave with a sense of where they're at. Like, I think I remember having that shift, or I feel like I'm approaching, because as someone starts to approach the next shift, things start to speed up in their life to bring about the change. Like, they might find they get ill, or they lose their job, or a marriage breaks up, because like their spirit is trying to bring them to the next big shift of their awareness that's going to happen. And I've had huge things happen each time I've shifted terrain. Sometimes it's very gentle, but sometimes it can be big. Depends, if people are in resistance or not. So we'll be explaining each terrain, and I think what people will get out of it is, A, they'll get a sense of their own terrain where they're currently at, and it will explain why they're drawn to certain things and not other things. It can start to help people figure out, well, what sort of healing modalities will be best for me at this terrain, what sort of health practices, spiritual practices might be most resonant for me at this terrain. It can also be incredibly helpful for people to start to get along better with, for example, their family or their spouse, because often we have people in our lives who are at a different terrain. They don't understand things the way we do. They don't see the world the way we do it. If we don't understand what's causing that, we can try and change them and argue with them. What's really shifted for me since I understood this model is my parents are at totally different terrains. My sister's at a different terrain. A lot of my friends are at 5 or 6 different terrains. And I now know where they're coming from, and I can listen through that understanding, and I can speak in language that they will understand and help me hugely with conflict in my life. The third thing that I think people will get out of it, as well as knowing where they're at in their own journey of evolution and being able to get along better with other people, is to start to have an understanding of what's happening on our planet. And not everyone's interested in that, but some people really are. And some people really want to understand, why are the political leaders doing what they're doing? Why won't they protect environmental rights? Why won't they, lift everybody's lifeboat in order so everyone can get fed? Well, because they're coming from square or they're coming from diamond, and that's not their priority. For example, at the terrain of pyramid, the will-based terrain, the only way someone will feel safe with the particular perception they have of reality and consciousness, and the sense of separation that they have from spirit, from the earth, from other people, and from themselves, is to accumulate power. That is the only way they can feel safe. And once you understand that, you can kind of go, okay, they're not evil psychos. They're actually doing this as a survival strategy. Okay, that changes how I feel about this. Once you understand that, then as a change maker, as an activist, instead of coming from anger and fear and reaction, you can start to actually come from understanding, which can create really empowered choice and empowered action.
And can people be in 2 different terrains at different times?
That's a really...
Will they go back, perhaps?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. So one of the core things we teach in this model is that people can only expand, they can't contract. And I'll give you a good example of that. If you'd spent your whole life living on the Earth, and then let's say 500 years ago you were living on the Earth, and you think the Earth is flat, and someone comes in a spaceship and takes you up into outer space, and you see that the Earth is round, you can't go back to thinking it's flat.
Yeah.
And so it's the same with the terrains. Once your perception and your relationship to consciousness expands, your awareness expands, you can't contract. You can't become unaware once you're aware. So people don't devolve in their evolution. But what can happen is moments can trigger them where they do behaviors that are, that might make them appear like they're at a different terrain. But depending what terrain they're actually at, they will recover from that quickly and come back to their center. So let's say someone who's at toroid or at infinity, which are really, really expanded terrains, they can get triggered. Their childhood conditioning can cause them to be triggered, and they can have moments of reaction. But they're so aware and they're so connected to infinite consciousness that they will notice it when it's happening. And within a few minutes, they will clean themselves up and come back to center.
Yeah.
So, we can all have behaviors that look like different terrains, but it's actually just the behavior that's changing. It's not our relationship to consciousness.
Okay.
So some people, when they first hear this, before they really understand the model, think, oh, I'm kind of diamond and spiral because I'm really interested in progress and innovation, but I do like to talk to my higher self, so I guess I'm both, And they're actually not. They're probably at diamond, but they're just starting to explore some teachings and ideas from a spiral, because that's the terrain all about being, a cosmic being and having a really actually real embodied sense of yourself as a multidimensional being.
So it's taken you quite a while to put all this material together.
It's taken both of us years, and my partner Alan and I have a kind of almost opposite upbringing and opposite life history that when the two of us came together, it kind of was inevitable that something like this would emerge. So he has a background in science and esoteric studies, and he's had about 20 different careers, and he's spent his whole life trying to understand political structures and economic structures and how can we integrate civilization with nature and really big societal questions like that. And I've had a really broad background as a lawyer and a screenwriter and Feldenkrais practitioner and all sorts of things. And my central question was always trying to understand the dynamics between people so that I could, create more harmony in my relationships with people. And so it was kind of like I was fascinated with what is really going on between people, and Alan was really fascinated with what is really going on at the macro level in our systems. But the two of us had the same kind of brain of seeing patterns. We were just looking at it from the opposite side of the coin. And so when we came together, it was like suddenly the fractal emerged of the pattern that's going on in our society, both at an individual level and at a civilizational level.
And looking online at what you have there, you've got the little symbols for the different terrains. The same spelling as terrain in the geographical sense. It's an interesting word, terrain.
Yeah, we originally were calling it things like worldviews and things like that, but we realised it's actually underneath someone's worldview. And the word terrain is really appropriate because if you think of a landscape, the geographical terrain is basically the conditions that allows whatever to arise in that environment. So the rocky terrain gives rise to certain plants, a flat terrain gives rise to certain plants, and it's the same with the terrain of our gut. If your gut is alkaline, certain kinds of things will happen. If your gut is acidic. So we realise that it's the same with our consciousness. We have a terrain, which is basically the fundamental way we see the world. It's essentially our relationship to reality. It's our awareness of consciousness, and that gives rise to the conditions of our life, to the choices we make, the kinds of work we do, the political beliefs we have, the food we eat, the place we live, the people we resonate with, the events we're drawn to. And because this is such radically new information, we wanted to give it a word that people didn't already associate with something else, another kind of spiritual ideology or something, because it's really very new information coming through.
And I was curious to know why 10. How did you arrive at that number? Because I'm a bit focused on the number 12 because of my interest in astrology. So 10 is a different number.
10, it's kind of a fractal that comes out of the human body, the 2 hands, the 2 feet, because the first 5 terrains are fear-based and the second 5 terrains are love-based. The first 5 are outer-focused and the second 5 are inner-focused. There's quite a lot of depth to this model. And it just emerged that the more we studied it, we realised that they fell into 10. And it was just really, really clear. But yeah, it surprised us as well because we had totally open minds when we started this. We had no expectations and we just kept asking questions and interrogating and observing the world. And it just slowly revealed itself to us over a number of years. And then we tested it against our friends and things we were seeing on television and politics and our own histories. And the more we tested it, the more we realised the pattern was accurate.
So how do they relate, say, to a system such as the Enneagram, which is based on 9, I believe?
Well, systems like the Enneagram, Myers-Briggs, human design, horoscopes, those are about what we call your unique geometry in this lifetime. So you're born, let's say I'm a Gemini, I'm a 3 Enneagram, I'm an ENFP, Myers-Briggs, I'm a wealth profile, is star profile, I'm a manifesting generator in the human design. That is my geometry that I came in with in this lifetime in order to do the work that I'm here to do and my life purpose and my talents and my particular personality type and my body type and all that. That doesn't change. Your terrain of consciousness is nothing like that. Your terrain of consciousness is the perception you have. It's the pair of glasses you're wearing that you're looking through, and that can change. So you could move from square to diamond to circle to spiral. They're 4 different terrains. As you move through those terrains, this is an evolutionary continuum. You'll take your Enneagram, your personality type, your life purpose, your talents, your skills with you. Those things don't change. So most of those systems are looking at all the things that are special about you. But this is looking at where you're at in your spiritual journey of evolution.
So I noticed looking online again, you've got an ebook on the terrains of famous people.
Yes, it was a really fun project. Obviously, we've written like a 1,000-page book, which is incredibly deep, and then we've written like a short 150-page introductory book, and we've written all sorts of things and how to resolve conflict using the 10 terrains and how to understand evolution using the 10 terrains. But one day we just thought one of the things we're interested in is people and people in history, and we started really researching people and feeling into them. And we started to realize that people really fell quite clearly into these groups. But what's fascinating about it is we've got writers, we've got artists, we've got philosophers, we've got environmentalists, we've got scientists, famous actors, everyone you could think of. And this book is free, by the way. If anyone wants to get it, you can have a look at it. It's at tenterrains.com, tenterrains.com. It's a free book. We made it free because it's just a really fun intro. And when you look through it, you'll see we've done it with pictures. So it's got like groups of faces at one terrain and then groups of faces at the next terrain. And when you tune into them, you remember what they did, you think of what you remember of them, what you know of them, you suddenly see, my God, they are all very similar. Mm-hmm. And then you look at the next group, you're like, they really are all very similar. And that has been fascinating.
Well, we're running out of time, unfortunately, but I think it just sounds really interesting. I think it's something that will be well received.